Scientists have finally begun opening the most mysterious burial bundles ever found in South America, and what was hidden inside has shocked everyone. These are the sealed mummy bundles of Peru's Paracas culture, tightly wrapped tombs, some over 3,000 years old, discovered nearly 100 years ago, and yet the majority of them have never been opened. Until now, modern technology developed in 2026 has finally allowed researchers to peer inside these forbidden bundles, and what they have revealed is rewriting everything we thought we knew about ancient Peru. For nearly a century, mainstream archaeology insisted these bundles contained nothing more than ordinary burials. Just bodies, just textiles, just the dead of an ancient civilization wrapped for the afterlife. Museums kept them in storage. The world forgot about them. But there was a problem. The bundles refused to stay silent, because every time a single one was opened, it produced findings so strange, so impossible, that researchers stopped opening them altogether. The bodies inside had elongated skulls that bore features no normal human should have. The textiles wrapping them were woven with materials that should not have existed in ancient Peru, and buried deep within the layers were objects, ritual items, anatomical anomalies that no archaeologist could fully explain. The decision was made. The remaining bundles were sealed away, locked in museum storage, hidden from the world for nearly 100 years, until a new generation of scientists picked up where the old researchers stopped, and what they had discovered has stunned the entire field of archaeology. To understand what makes these bundles so unusual, we have to travel back to 1925, to one of the most desolate stretches of the Peruvian coast, the Paracas Peninsula, a landscape so dry, so barren, that almost nothing grows there, a wasteland of sand and stone. And yet hidden beneath this lifeless surface lay the secret of an entire forgotten civilization. A Peruvian archaeologist named Julio Tello had been mapping the area for months. He had heard rumors from locals of strange shapes buried in the dunes, mounds that did not belong. He began to dig, and what he uncovered would become one of the largest single mortuary discoveries ever made on the planet. By the time excavations finished in 1928, Tello had recovered 429 individual mummy bundles from a single cemetery, wrapped in textiles so fine, so beautifully embroidered, that art historians would later call them among the greatest masterpieces ever produced by any ancient civilization. Each bundle was sealed shut with intricate stitching, each one carefully placed in its own burial chamber, and each one weighing as much as 500 pounds. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn, because Tello did not have the resources to open all 429 bundles. The work was too delicate, the textiles too fragile. A single mistake could destroy treasures that had survived for thousands of years. So he opened only a fraction, maybe half, maybe less. The rest were transported to Lima Museum for safekeeping. They were placed in storage, and then they sat there, untouched, sealed, for nearly 100 years. What was inside them? Nobody knew. For decades, researchers were too afraid to open the remaining bundles. The first ones that had been opened revealed content so unexpected that scholars argue for years about what they meant. Inside the layers were not just bodies. There were entire wardrobes of clothing, embroidered mantles depicting strange figures with elongated heads, and faces that did not match anyone living in ancient Peru. There were ceramic offerings shaped like beings with oversized eyes. There were food remains preserved so perfectly that researchers could identify the exact ingredients of meals eaten 3,000 years ago. And there were the skulls. Inside many of the bundles were heads stretched into impossible shapes, some pointing sharply backwards, others rising upward in towering domes. The cranial volume of some specimens reached 1,600 cubic centimeters, hundreds of cubic centimeters more than the average modern human. Some skulls showed only one parietal bone where there should have been two. Others contained extra openings in the bone never seen in normal anatomy. And a few of the mummies inside still had their hair preserved, naturally red, naturally blonde. In a region of the world where the indigenous population has had black hair for thousands of years, this is where mainstream archaeology hit a wall. Because the easy explanation was that this was simply a culture that practiced cranial deformation. Babies tied between two boards from birth. Skulls slowly reshaped over months and years. Case closed. But the problem was the bundles themselves told a different story. They were filled with too many anomalies that head binding alone could not explain. And so, rather than continue to confront questions they could not answer, the field quietly stopped opening them. The remaining bundles sat in storage, forgotten, for 3 generations, until everything changed in recent years. A new generation of archaeologists, biologists, and forensic scientists began to ask a question their predecessors had been afraid to face. What if the bundles contain answers we are now finally capable of understanding? What if technology has advanced far enough that we can read the secrets the original researchers could not? The decision was made. Selected bundles would be reopened, but this time, with every modern technique available to science. What they found has redrawn the entire history of the Paracas. The first thing scientists noticed was that the bundles were not random burials. They were carefully constructed records of an entire person's life. Each layer represented a different stage of identity. The outermost wrapping showed the individual's status in death. The middle layers contained personal possessions, tools, jewelry, trade goods. The innermost layers contained the most intimate items, the clothing the person wore in life, the food they ate, the weapons they carried. By the time researchers reached the body itself, they had unwrapped what amounted to a complete autobiography, written not in words, but in textiles, objects, and offerings. But the body itself was where the real mystery began. Modern CT scanning, the same photon-counting technology revolutionizing medical imaging in 2026, has allowed researchers to look inside these bundles without even unwrapping them. Internal structures invisible to the naked eye are now being mapped in extraordinary detail, and the scans are revealing things no one expected. Some of the bodies inside the bundles show evidence of surgical procedures performed before death. Holes drilled into living skulls with such precision that the bone shows clear signs of healing. The patient survived. Some bundles contain individuals with multiple operations. 3, 4, 5 separate skull surgery performed across a single lifetime, with a survival rate that is now being calculated at 40%, rising as high as 83% in the later periods of Andean civilization. While the ancient Greeks were still struggling with basic medicine, the Paracas were performing brain surgery with success rates that rival some procedures today. But the surgeries are not the most disturbing finding, because hidden inside several of the bundles are objects that should not exist in pre-Columbian South America. Trade goods sourced from regions thousands of miles away. Materials that researchers cannot trace to any known supplier. Pigments and dyes that match the chemistry of distant civilizations across the Pacific. And in one bundle, a cluster of seed preserved in such perfect condition that botanists believe they might still be capable of germinating after 3,000 years. Then came the textiles. The Paracas burial cloths are considered some of the finest ever produced by any ancient civilization on Earth. Some pieces measure over 100 feet in length. Some contain over 1 million individual stitches. Some include embroidered figures depicting beings with elongated heads identical to the skulls inside the bundles themselves. And some contain dyed threads and colors that mainstream science cannot reproduce, even today, using ancient technology. The most intricate cloths show creatures that researchers call the oculate being, a figure with massive staring eyes, often depicted holding what appear to be severed heads. Some scholars believe this represents a deity. Others believe it represents the elongated skull elite themselves. And others believe that the oculate being represents something the Paracas had actually seen, something they tried to record across generations of fabric and ceramic, something modern archaeology has yet to identify. But the most shocking discovery of all came from what was found between the layers. When researchers carefully separated the textiles wrapping one specific bundle, they discovered fragments of human hair embedded between the cloth folds, hair that did not belong to the body inside, hair from multiple different individuals, as if mourners had cut their own hair and woven it into the wrappings before sealing the bundle shut. This is not unheard of in ancient cultures, but what makes this finding extraordinary is the genetic diversity of the hair. Samples from different bundles contain hair from individuals whose mtDNA does not match any local Native American population. The hair colors range from black to deep red to natural blonde, and the strands themselves have been described by some researchers as significantly thinner than typical pre-Columbian hair. The implications have not yet been fully accepted by mainstream science, because if the hair belonged to mourners who attended these burials, and the mourners had genetic markers that do not match the indigenous population, that suggest the Paracas had contact with people whose origins remain completely unexplained. 3,000 years ago, on the desert coast of South America, where, according to mainstream archaeology, no such contact should have been possible, the debate continues today. Critics insist the genetic results must be explained by contamination. The bundles were stored for decades in conditions that allowed handling by museum workers, researchers, and visitors. Any DNA found could theoretically come from modern sources. But supporters of the new findings point out that the hair in question was discovered between sealed textile layers that had not been disturbed since the original burial. The contamination explanation, while possible, becomes less convincing the deeper into the bundle researchers go. And there's one more detail that mainstream archaeology continues to struggle with. Among the 429 bundles recovered by Teo, only a portion have ever been fully opened and studied. The rest remain in storage at the Lima Museum to this day, some still wrapped exactly as they were when they came out of the desert sand, untouched for nearly a century. The contents of those bundles are entirely unknown. They have not been scanned, have not been imaged, have not been opened. Their secrets remain hidden behind layers of ancient cloth. Some researchers estimate that fewer than half of the original bundles have ever been examined, which means the largest single mortuary discovery ever made in the Americas. One of the most significant archaeological finds in human history is still mostly unexplored. Hundreds of sealed bundles, each one potentially containing entire lives, entire identities, entire secrets of a culture that practiced brain surgery, wove textiles of impossible complexity, and buried their dead with elongated skulls that science still cannot fully explain. This raises a question that mainstream archaeology rarely addresses publicly. Why have these bundles never been opened? Funding has been available for nearly a century. Museums have lobbied for permission. Researchers have proposed projects. And yet the bundles remain sealed. Some have suggested it is a matter of conservation. The textiles are fragile. The risk of damage is high. Others have pointed to ongoing disputes between Peru and foreign institutions over who has the right to study these remains. And a few researchers have hinted at something more uncomfortable, that the previous generations of archaeologists who did open these bundles encountered findings they could not explain, and chose to stop the program rather than continue. The truth is likely a combination of all three. But what is certain is that the new generation of scientists, armed with technology their predecessors could not have imagined, is no longer willing to leave these bundles untouched. Photon-counting CT scanners now allow researchers to look inside without removing a single thread. Ancient DNA techniques can extract genetic information from samples microscopic in size. Spectroscopy can identify the chemical composition of pigments, dyes, and organic materials in seconds. The technology that was missing for 100 years has finally arrived, and the findings being reported are starting to confirm what some researchers have long suspected. The Paracas were not a simple coastal culture. They were one of the most sophisticated and mysterious civilizations to have ever existed in the Americas. They performed surgery. They produced textiles of breathtaking complexity. They buried their dead with elongated skulls and ritual objects from across the known world. They built geoglyphs in the desert hillsides that predate the famous Nazca lines by centuries, and in some cases by nearly 1,000 years. They were a culture that understood things modern archaeology is still struggling to piece together. And the bundles, those silent sealed records, are finally beginning to speak. This discovery transforms our understanding of pre-Columbian South America in ways that few archaeological finds ever have. It suggests that the rise of complex civilization in the Americas happened earlier, more sophisticated, and more mysterious than mainstream textbooks have ever admitted. It suggests that the people who built these bundles understood the relationship between identity and death in ways no modern archaeologist has fully grasped. And it suggests that there is still far more buried in the Peruvian sands than science has so far had the courage to uncover. But here is the deepest implication. If the bundles already opened have produced findings this strange, this unexplainable, this disturbing, what lies waiting inside the hundreds that have never been touched? What individuals are sealed inside those textiles? What objects? What faces? What evidence? What truths about the ancient world that have remained hidden for nearly 100 years simply because no one has been willing to look? The answer is not in some distant future. It is sitting in storage in Lima right now, wrapped in cloth that has not been disturbed since the moment it was sewn shut 3,000 years ago. Each bundle a sealed record of a life, each one waiting, each one capable of changing what we think we know about human history. And the most haunting truth of all is this: most of those bundles will probably never be opened in our lifetimes. The bureaucracy is too slow, the funding is too limited, the political disputes too complicated. So the answers remain locked away, frozen in time, watched over by the silent figures embroidered onto their outer wrappings. The oculate being, eyes wide open, staring out across the centuries, guarding secrets that the modern world is only just beginning to understand. If you found this discovery as fascinating as we did, consider subscribing, because somewhere right now, in a sealed museum storeroom in Lima, lies the answer to one of the greatest mysteries in human history, waiting, wrapped in cloth, untouched, to be found.